So let's just go through these trump cards from a magical point of view right now. The Fool is unnumbered. It's 0. That symbolizes the field of unlimited possibilities. The Fool does not have a specific place in the sequence of the tarot cards, as he dances as he will through the tarot. This card is above all the other major arcana cards and is also between them all. Thus, he corresponds to the element of air. The Fool is often seen as being on a journey through the trumps. The sun rising up behind him is white. This represents the spiritual source from which all proceeds and returns. He's facing northwest, the direction of the unknown. He's looking upwards toward the sky, the sphere of the higher self. He's about to step off a cliff into the unknown. He has all the tools and resources he needs in the wallet on his wand, which represents the infinite substance of the mind, which can fulfill every need. The white rose in his left hand represents the spiritual purity and grace. The little white dog represents the guidance and assistance of the deep mind. Dogs are often sacred to the moon. The white mountains represent the pureness of spirit, which is his true home. It is important to understand that the Fool is not an idiot. The Greek word for fool means independent thinker and doer. The Fool sees the possibilities only, never misfortune. He is the visionary. Okay, now in this, different from the Juggler of the Marseille deck, this is the Magician of the occult deck, as from the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition. The Magician corresponds to the planet Mercury, which represents the Hermetic principle of mentalism. The number of the Magician is 1, the number of beginnings. The Magician bridges the world of the seen and the unseen. His right hand, left hand in the old Marseille decks, holds up a wand to the sky, and his other hand directs the energy onto the earth. He channels the power of the universal mind into the earth to be realized. Above his head is the infinity symbol. The snake on his belt, which is biting its own tail, also symbolizes infinity. The more traditional symbolism of the left hand receiving wisdom as the right hand guides it holds some important truths regarding the roles of the masculine versus the feminine within the mind. Why the hands were changed in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is always going to remain a mystery. His altar on the trestle board holds the symbol of the 4 suits of the minor arcana, which represent the tools of the manifestation and the 4 elements of the magician, fire, water, air, and earth. These symbolize the appropriate use of discipline, focus, concentration, along with balance, which are required to manifest results with magic. His robe is white, a symbol of spiritual purity, but his cloak is red. This represents the desire to create. The red roses are cultivated roses, which symbolize the cultivation of the senses. The lilies symbolize the purity of purpose. All right, so for the High Priestess is the great goddess. She sits before the veil of the great mystery. The tree of life in the background is partially obscured. She sits between the 2 pillars of the Temple of Solomon, as it is she who is the vessel through whom all make the great passage between the worlds. The veil behind her is only pierced by those whom are initiated. The pomegranates on the tapestry are sacred to Persephone, representing the underworld, or the universal unconscious mind. Her blue robe of the priestess represents sacred knowledge. She wears the crown of Isis, symbolizing the sacred feminine mysteries. The solar cross on her breast represents the balance of the masculine and feminine polarities. In her lap, she holds a half-revealed and half-concealed Torah, or the law, which is only fully learned through the initiation into the underworld. The crescent under her left foot represents that she is the keeper of all the lunar mysteries. The palm indicates fertility of the deep mind, and the cube on which she sits represents the earth, which manifests all from the deep. The High Priestess corresponds to the moon. The Empress While the High Priestess represents the moon goddess, the Empress represents the earth goddess, or the goddess of fertility. Her celestial correspondence is the planet Venus, the planet of love, creativity, fertility, art, harmony, luxury, beauty, and grace. The Empress is a full-figured, fertile goddess. Her blonde hair represents vibrant, healing energy. Her disposition is calm, peaceful, and loving. On her head is the star crown, which represents the earth's true origins, and the goddess's connection with the celestial world. Her robe has pomegranates, which were being guarded by the High Priestess. This symbolizes the seasons of light and dark on the earth, as well as the underworld being also a part of her domain. She sits upon the cushions of red velvet, with the symbol of Venus emblazoned upon it. This represents all the luxuries and fineries of the planet Venus and of the earth itself. She is a goddess of opulence. The Empress is amidst a lavish forest with a stream running through it, which represent the correspondence of the feminine energies. She is one with the lushness of nature. The golden wheat springs from the ground, representing abundance, prosperity, and harvest. The Emperor is the husband of the Empress. Where she is the feminine principle, he is the masculine. He symbolizes pure power and authority. His countenance is stern and somewhat severe. His white beard symbolizes experience and wisdom. Behind his throne are desert mountains, and his throne is adorned with 4 ram's heads representing power, inventiveness, determination, action, initiative, and leadership. The ram, as a symbol of the zodiacal sign of Aries, corresponds to the Emperor. The Emperor holds an ankh upright in his right hand, symbolizing eternal life. In his left hand, he holds an orb, which represents the supreme rulership over his realm. The flame-colored background and the Emperor's red clothing represent the fire of the element of Aries and all that it represents. The Emperor indicates dominion through rationality, meaning dominion over one's emotions and imagination in order to gain self-reliance and freedom. Only from dominion over one's lower nature can true dominion over the physical world be attained. The Hierophant, or Hierophant as it's sometimes pronounced, is also known as the Pope or the High Priest. He is the masculine partner of the High Priestess. The Hierophant corresponds to the zodiacal sign of Taurus. He is seen as a religious ruler sitting in a temple. He wears 3 fine religious vestments which correspond to the superconscious, the conscious, and the unconscious or celestial world, earth, and underworld. His 3-tiered crown also suggests the 3 worlds. He is delivering a benediction or blessing with his right hand. The triple scepter is another symbol of the dominion over the 3 worlds. The crossed keys represent a balance between the conscious and the deep minds, which unlock the secrets of truth. The 2 kneeling at his feet represent the unconscious and conscious minds being subordinated to the higher good. The carpet beneath him is pink, representing the purity of desire. The black and white stripes correspond to the spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical bodies of humans. The red and orange robe represent desire and reason, whereas the white represents the purity of purpose. He represents authority in the realms of thoughts and feelings. To accept this authority means to uphold any tradition that authority represents. The Hierophant can represent the higher self and the supreme authority, which self represents. The Lovers. The zodiacal sign often corresponding to the Lovers is Gemini. The 2 figures of the Lovers are blessed and protected by the angel Raphael, who is seen as this mystical third above them. Raphael as the angel of Mercury, which is the ruler of Gemini. Mercury and Gemini can represent communication. And this card represents the masculine and feminine parts of the mind, the surface and the deep mind, or the god and the goddess, working in perfect balance and harmony. Purple usually represents royalty in the tarot, and Raphael's purple cloak suggests this. The sun shining the blessings over the scene suggests blessings abounding when the principle of gender within the mind is balanced. The idea of the Garden of Eden before the fall is obvious in this card, which represents the necessity of the mind to think for itself in order to evolve. When this happens, one is often thrown out of the garden in order to be freed from instinct and to develop self-awareness. The snake symbolizes wisdom. The flames behind the man represent the masculine element of fire. The 12 flames depict the zodiac, which lies in potential in all people. The man, conscious mind, looks to the woman, the deep mind, who looks to the angel, the superconscious mind, indicating the flow of thought which brings about all manifestation on every plane. The mountain is a masculine symbol, while the water is a feminine symbol, indicating again the balance between the two forces within each of us. The chariot corresponds with the zodiacal sign of Cancer. The driver sits within the canopy of 6-pointed stars representing the celestial world. The crescent moons on the driver's shoulders face outward, which give reference to the fact that the moon directs the celestial forces onto the earth. The alchemical symbols on the driver's tunic represents the power to transmute base humanity into pure spirit. The square symbolizes manifestation. The laurel and star crown represent the purposes of existence on earth, which is to grow and to evolve toward our own God selves. The wings on the chariot represent inspiration and the Hindu sign of union of positive and negative. The driver is within the chariot, and he represents the crab of Cancer in its shell. The black sphinx represents the unseen mind and unconscious emotional compulsions, while the white sphinx represents that which we are conscious of. The charioteer holds the wand of the magician while he drives by the pure power of his will and intention. The city behind him represents the phenomenalistic or mortal world out of which he is traveling in order to seek the world of spirit. Strength has been, remember in the old decks this was 11, not 8. So some decks this is going to still be 11. A woman gently caresses a lion's head and jaw, smiling lovingly and peacefully at it. The woman represents the feminine principle, taming the beast. The Beauty and the Beast story is an appropriate metaphor. The same symbol for infinity as depicted for the magician circles over her head. She can be seen as the feminine counterpart to the magician. Her white robe is the same as that of the Fool, which represents the purity and innocence of spirit. The same mountain in the Lover's card, symbolizing the masculine conscious mind, is behind her. The lion, symbolizing our instinctive natures, is giving the woman an affectionate and submissive gesture by sticking out his tongue. The feminine figure tames the beast with the strength of pure love. Her left arm represents the deep mind and her right arm the surface mind. Her left arm is doing all the work, while the right one is merely guiding her work. The role of the surface mind is to hold a framework, allowing the deep mind to do all of the real work. Her floral crown and garland represent that she is associated with the earthiest fire sign, that is the fixed sign of Leo. The hermit stands on top of a mountain in solitude. In his right hand he holds a lantern aloft while carrying a staff in his left hand. The mountain is white, and white symbolizes the heights of the truth of spirit. The hermit has attained his spiritual pinnacle and is ready to light the way for others. This symbolizes the concept that perfected beings of former races who, rather than simply moving on to their next plane of evolution, stay behind to teach and help humanity who is still struggling. The six-rayed star is his lantern representing wisdom, the union of the mental world with the physical world, the feminine with the masculine, and the primal fire with the water, which creates all four elements. The staff carried by the hermit is a symbol of the initiate and is a sign of spiritual authority. The fact that the staff is in his left hand suggests that all spiritual authority is in the deep mind, while the lantern in his right hand suggests that the conscious mind must stay focused on the light. His gray cloak represents secrecy and hidden occult truths. The zodiacal sign which corresponds to the hermit is Virgo. The Wheel of Fortune. The four cherubic figures in the corners of this card represent the four watchers of the universe, which are commonly symbolized by the four fixed signs of the zodiac. The angel in human form in the upper left corresponds to Aquarius, the eagle, Scorpio, the lion, Leo, and the bull, Taurus. They are each holding the book of law or Torah, representing wisdom. On the wheel itself are the Hebrew letters, which is the Tetragrammaton. In the midst of these are Torah, read anti-clockwise, or tarot, read clockwise, which translates to tarot, or rota, which means wheel. The snake moving down the left side of the wheel represents the life force descending into the material world. This is also called involution. The Anubis figure ascending the right side of the wheel is Hermes, or Tahuti, representing wisdom and the path of the return, which is called evolution. The Sphinx at the top of the wheel represents stability in the midst of the turning of the wheel. The center section contains the alchemical symbols for mercury, sulfur, water, and salt, the building blocks of life, and the four elements. The outer section is representative of the mortal world. The 8 spokes in the wheel represent infinity and also the turning of the seasons, the wheel of the year. The blue background represents wisdom and the royalty of the planet Jupiter. The planetary correspondence for the Wheel of Fortune is Jupiter. Justice, which is sometimes 8, but in this deck is 11. The zodiacal correspondence with Justice is Libra. The figure of Justice sits in her chair, cloaked in red and holding a sword in her right hand, the scales in her left. This represents the natural tendency toward balance between the deep mind and the force of the surface mind, or masculine mind. She wears a crown with a small square on it, representing the divine order of her thoughts. The square on her clasp is the divine order, which protects the circle of spirit and the eternity of spirit, which is within all life. The double-edged sword represents how a divine mind is just by virtue of the fact that it is impartial. All are subject to the laws of the divine mind, and divine mind is just and impartial. The sword has its point up, which represents that there is only victory in the law. The sword in her right hand demonstrates the masculine mind, which must have the function of choice and discernment. The scales are in her left hand, representing the deep mind, and the deep mind is intuitive and balances the conscious and logical mind. The white shoe coming out from beneath her cloak symbolizes that the law of cause and effect is eternal. All causes have consequence. The purple cloth draped behind her signifies the royal supremacy of divine law, and the gray pillars represent the ultimate secrecy and occult nature of the law, which can only be understood through experience. The Hanged Man. This man hangs upside down from the tree of life. He is suspended and inverted, which represents that the mortal world is a mirror image of the physical world. In order to understand the world of the invisible, one must experience that our world is upside down. His right foot is bound to the tree, while his left foot is bent at the knee and tucked in behind his right leg, forming a triangle. His arms are bent, with his hands held behind his back, forming an inverted triangle. His red pants represent desire. His blue coat represents the emotional body. His yellow shoes represent his mind. The bright yellow halo around his head represents the principle of mentalism. And the gray background represents the secrecy of the occult truths that he is obtaining. The Hanged Man is the card of spiritual renewal, meditation, and insight in magic. In the old magical paths, the Hanged Man represented the element of water, and thus being submerged into the occult truths, initiation, baptism, etc. The Death card, which was usually unnamed in the older decks, shows a traditional figure of death as a skeleton and a grim reaper riding on a white horse, holding a black and white flag. The skeleton is part of the body that decomposes the most slowly. He is wearing armor, which symbolizes that he is an unconquerable warrior. The white horse represents death's spiritual purpose and journey. The only thing that can die is form, but spirit is indestructible. Death signifies rebirth and renewal. The ultimate message is one of great news. Men, women, children, and clergy are depicted on the card, reminding us that death comes to every part of life as a servant of life. Death, the ultimate illusion, is in service of life, bringing us new forms at all times. The flag is a white rose on a black background, which depicts the rebirth out of darkness. The sun represents immortality of the spirit, for which death is a servant. The pillars are guarding the sun, representing the visible, masculine force, and the invisible, feminine force, which constantly must dance in harmony. The boat, which carries the souls across the river Styx, represents the constant care for which each soul is under. Death is simply an organizer. It is a transformation of form. Death is an initiation and happens constantly every day as cells die and are reborn. The sun cycles wax and wane like the moon. Death is ruled by Scorpio. For Temperance, the angel, a sacred hermaphrodite, is depicted representing the hermetic principle of gender. The angel has one foot on dry land, representing the material world or masculine or conscious mind, and one foot in the water, representing the invisible or feminine or deep mind. She is balancing the thought and the feeling. The triangle inside the square on her robe represents the element of fire, the primal first element being contained and given form, earth, the last element. She is pouring water between two chalices. The cups represents the deep mind and the surface mind. One cup can be thought of as holding hot water and the other cup holding cold water. The water can be flowing in either direction, the subconscious mind seeking wisdom from above, or inspiration of the superconscious mind being poured and reaching the deep mind. She is embodying the inscription of Apollo's temple of Delphi, know thyself, and also everything in moderation. The astrological sign of Temperance is Sagittarius. The card of the devil portrays a devil creature who is half goat and half human. The goat can symbolize lust, but also can represent the scapegoat, that animal onto which the humanity projects its own fears and darkness in order to attempt to avoid experiencing them. The devil represents the external world onto which we blame our problems. He has the wings of a bat, which symbolize our nocturnal selves, our dark side, taking wing and having free rein. The inverted pentacle above him represents the horned goat, and also the submission of the spirit into the physical. The man and woman who are chained seem oblivious to their plight. Their chains are quite loose and can be overcome at any time. The devil himself seems disinterested and has a hypnotic expression, which gives rise to the notion that he is there out of obligation. The couple is actually imprisoning the devil until the time comes when they decide to take off the chains and cease this game. The couple is actually the same couple as in the Lovers card. The lovers represent choice, and the devil represents bondage caused by their own choices. The dark cave has no walls, which represent that there is no entrance and no exit. This reminds us that all happens within our own minds. There's no escape from our minds, since our minds are all that is. Hell is simply the choices we are making. The only way to escape from so-called hell is to choose to see it differently and to recognize that it is all within our own making. Thus, the devil is one of our greatest teachers. He is patiently waiting our awakening. The devil corresponds to the sign of Capricorn, the goat. The tower on top of a rough and uneven mountain. Lightning strikes, causing flames to pour from the windows. People are seen as either jumping, falling, or being evicted from the structure. The tower signifies destruction of forms. The tower often symbolizes the biblical Tower of Babel, representing the structures in our lives that are pulling away from our higher selves. The lightning bolt is a type of salvation from above, although it can be interpreted as being violent or even as being some sort of punishment. It is in reality our own higher self taking matters into its own hands and destroying that which would ultimately destroy us. Lightning always represents a flash of enlightenment. It functions to annihilate ignorance and structures that are potentially dangerous to us. The figures in the devil who have not chosen to free themselves are being forced by the light of truth from above, the higher self. There are 22 flames in the shape of Hebrew yods. These represent the 22 keys of wisdom in the tarot, which remind us of the ultimate good which comes from the destruction of that which no longer serves our higher plans. The gray clouds represent the confused mind, which brings forth the tower of illusion. The lightning pierces the clouds. Where there is lightning, there will be rain. When there is rain, there will be sunshine. The ruling planet of the tower is Mars. The star card represents a naked woman kneeling at the edge of a small pool of water. She holds 2 containers of water, reminiscent of the figure in the Temperance card. She pours water out on the earth, which is coming to life in great lushness. From the other container, she pours water onto the dry land, which forms 5 small streams. These streams represent the 5 senses and the 4 elements plus spirit, similar to the pentagram. The figure has 1 foot on the ground and the other foot in the water. This represents her ability to exist in both worlds simultaneously. She is in balance between the seen and the unseen, the practical and the intuitive, the masculine and the feminine, the conscious and also the deep minds. A star shines behind her, surrounded by 6 stars and a 7th star below them. The large star represents the higher self, and the 7 stars represent the 7 planetary energies which govern us all. Each star is 8-pointed, which represents the same mystery of 8 as the 8 Sabbats, the Eightfold Path of the Buddhist, the Earth and the 7 planets of old, etc. The bird in the background represents the sacred ibis, who is forever singing the praises of life. The astrological sign of the star is Aquarius. The moon represents the deep mind. The moon is a reflection of the sunlight on Earth. The card for the moon, however, represents the astrological sign of Pisces rather than the planetary energies of the moon, which are represented by the High Priestess card. The pool in the base of the card represents the deep mind, and the shellfish coming out of the pool is the concept of the forms which arise out of the depths of our deep minds. The dog represents the tamed or trained aspect of the mind, and the wolf represents the untamed or wild side of our minds. The path leads between the 2 towers, which are amidst the mountains. The path of the deep mind, or feminine, moves into forms of the mountains, or the masculine mind. The towers represent the Hermetic principles of polarity. This card represents all of the psychic and the unconscious and the unseen. The sun represents the joy of life and the fulfillment of our divine purpose. As it is the source of all that is within our solar system, the sun represents the power of life itself. The child playing joyfully in the foreground represents the happiness of our inner spirit when we are in tune with our higher selves. The nakedness represents our true self has no shame and no need to protect itself. It has no need to protect its purity nor its innocence. The white horse represents strength and purity of spirit, which is the vehicle for the higher self. The child rides the horse without a saddle and does not need to control or steer it, which denotes the perfect control that exists between the surface and deep minds. The orange flag that the child holds aloft in his left hand represents the solar energy that is inherent in all life. These are high solar vibrations that are, in essence, the divine will or superconscious mind. Notice that some solar rays are straight and others are waves. This represents the different rates of vibration between personal consciousness and the superconscious minds. The sunflowers are emblems of the principle of correspondence and are the sunlight made manifest on the earth. The 4 sunflowers represent the solar logos as manifest on the earth, the number 4 being the number of manifestation. The Judgment card depicts naked men, women, and children being called forth from their graves, with their arms uplifted and spread out. They are being called upon from the depths by the Archangel Gabriel, who is sounding his trumpet. In the background, gigantic mountains and waves loom, representing the illusions of the physical world, which become insignificant in the presence of the Angel of Judgment. The ocean is the collective soul or the collective unconscious mind. Gabriel's banner is red on white, just like the magician's clothing. This card represents that the divine judges everything as good. All is forgiven in divine mind. All obstacles are a distant memory. And only good remains, as only good is real. This card represents fire in the most esoteric sense. And finally, the world. The center of this card shows a woman, or probably actually a hermaphrodite, dancing and rejoicing in the sense of divine completion. She has one leg crossed over the other in a similar fashion to the Hanged Man. If you reverse the Hanged Man, he is very similar in posture as the figure of the world. The Hanged Man is submerged into the deep mind, while the figure of the world is dancing to the realization of the superconscious mind. She holds a wand in each hand, which symbolizes the power over both the surface and the deep minds that the superconscious has. The green wreath surrounding her represents the aura of divine success, divine victory, and divine abundance. The wreath is tied with red ribbons in the form of an infinity symbol representing the exalted reality of what was in the magician and in strength. The stars within the wreath depict the cosmic reality of the superconscious mind. The figures in each of the 4 corners of the world card, such as on the Wheel of Fortune card, represent the 4 watchers of the fixed signs of the zodiac. The world represents the superconscious expression of the concept of the Wheel of Fortune. The planetary ruler of this card is Saturn, which is the planet ruling both Capricorn and Aquarius in the old systems. And that's our little trek through the magical trump cards. Much love and many, many blessings.